Hello, and thank you for joining us on Making Meals Matter. I'm Marilee Gross. I'm the host of today's show, and I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Laura Bashar, a very busy mom of three. This dynamic woman is the voice behind Family Spice, the world cuisine for the whole family, and since 2008. She's a published author, photographer, blogger, graphic designer, and let's not forget, chef. So Laura's books, The Camp and Cabin Cookbook, and the cooking techniques and recipes with olive oil are both creative and insightful, not to mention beautiful pieces of work. So I want to introduce you now to Laura. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to get to know more, not only about your background, but your cookbooks. You know, you definitely have an eye for creativity and a love of food. So when did you first discover your passions for these? Tell us
Well,
the story.
for cooking, I mean, my mom was a working mom. She has a PhD, professional, both parents. And it started with my mom calling me up and saying, hey, can you take the meat out of the freezer? Hey, can you start the spaghetti sauce? Hey, so it started with helping her. And even though she worked, a serious job as a micropaleontologist in the oil business, she had long, good hours of work. We always had a home cooked meal at home, always. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was raised. And, she's Persian, my dad's American. We grew up in Houston, so we had Gulf shrimp, we ate shrimp Creole, we ate, you name it. We had Persian food, we had American food, things like that. So we ate everything, and I learned by watching her, my mom's side of the family, the Persian side, they all cook, from my uncle to my aunts, my grandmother. Food is a very central part of family time, getting together at the table, and that was the seed that was sown. And then when I was working, when I was single and working in ad agencies, I would always show up with my leftovers for lunch, and people are like, "What'd you make? You cook?" Right. And I'm always fascinated by everybody who is so intimidated with the cooking, because I have had no formal training, and I just, like everything else I do, I just kind of go in head first and and figure it out on my own, or with cookbooks. But that's what started it all.
Very interesting. And you're one of many similar stories that maybe there isn't the formal training, but some experiences earlier on. Once you learn the basic skills for cooking chicken or whatever, the rules behind it, we get to expound upon that and get creative in the kitchen. You mentioned you have a Persian background, so tell us about Persian food.
Persian food. Oh, it's great. So my husband's Persian too, but he's very Americanized. And so we're not a very serious traditional type family as far as that's concerned. So I've updated a lot of my recipes to be a little more, not that Persian food isn't unhealthy, but I watch the oil. I cook with olive oil. I have lots of vegetables. There's a dish that has spinach and herbs. Well, I throw in kale too, So I've updated a lot of things to be a little more westernized, I guess you could say. But the Persian food itself is not like, for example, Indian food is heavily spiced with wonderful spices, a lot of variety of spices. Persian food uses a lot of herbs in our cooking. It's a very vital ingredient, but it's not a spiced type meal. We do dried lemons. We use sour grapes and things like that for our stews. We use a lot of vegetables. We have stews of all different kinds: okra, eggplant, herbs, things like that. And I think the stews get kind of forgotten because everybody knows the kebab. And Persian kebab is one of those wonderful treats to have. And we make it at home, but it's something better. It's a lot of work, so everybody eats it at restaurants because we'd rather have someone else do all the work for us. And so when you go to the restaurant, we always order kebab because I make all those stews at home. But it's very fragrant food. We have saffron and turmeric. So we've got vibrant colors. And I try to bring a lot of that, especially the herbs, into what I do for normal cooking, I would say non-Persian cooking. and just kind of make it a little bit more flavorful. I think a lot of times people think American food is very bland. And sometimes it just depends on what you grew up with. And that's what I've noticed. I've been to friends' house growing up and people who don't cook very often, and it's just like, gosh, they don't know anything about spices and herbs and things like that. So everything for me is kind of like, it needs a little more something. I don't know. But I personally love Persian food. It's very unusual, I think, if you're not used to Middle Eastern cuisine, for sure. Yeah. But everybody I've served it to just falls in love with it.
So what would be then 5 of your go-to flavor boosters when you're cooking?
When I'm cooking, and this is what we talk about in both of my cookbooks as well, is if you start with the high quality ingredients from the beginning, it does come through in your cooking, especially when you're cooking seasonal and you use what's season, you get tomatoes in the wintertime, you're going to get something bland versus tomatoes from the summer. So my first thing is just make sure you're cooking with high quality ingredients, and it doesn't have to be whole paycheck, organic, that kind of thing. You can just get high quality in season vegetables at Trader Joe's and whatever's on sale at your regular grocery store. The other thing is of course the herbs. Dried herbs work, fresh herbs work even better. And in my garden, I've got like 4 different types of sages. I'm always planting. Yeah, they all have a different kind of component to them. Thyme, I think I've got 2 thymes, got fresh oregano, basil, chives, things like that. Never have enough parsley, so I buy tons of parsley, cilantro, all those things. They add so much fragrance and flavor to your meal. And it's not, like I said, spice doesn't mean spicy. So, you don't have to add the heat unless you wanted to. And the other thing is just, I also cook with my eyes. I try to get as many colors as I can. I've noticed sometimes, especially when the kids were toddlers, we were doing too much beige. So I'm like, no, I got to add the rainbow. I'd add more green, more red, and, purple. We have a lot of purple vegetables. So don't just cook for what you taste and smell, but also cook with your eyes and get that. You want a colorful dish before you, as much as you can. It's not always possible. So the other tip is just keep it colorful too.
Yeah, so I just had an interview with Meadow Lynn, and she talked about the vibrancy of colors correlating to chakras. It was a really interesting, conversation. And I want to mention how even plating makes a difference. I mean, your pictures of your food are beautiful. And I know for some of that's the cookbook, but tell us how you plate food to make it aesthetically pleasing.
Well, you didn't see the pictures from when I first started blogging, so.
Well, everyone has to start somewhere. Not everyone.
We all did start somewhere. 10 years ago, we were shooting zooming in all the way. You couldn't even see the plate because you were so zoomed into the food. When I serve the meal, and I think that has to do with my kids, is I've learned to keep things separate. And I think that's just something moms kind of learn to do. Because, not everybody will eat Brussels sprouts. Not everybody will eat mushrooms. Not everybody will eat, all the same vegetables. So a lot of times when I'm doing a roasted chicken or anything like that, I have everything separate. But when I'm plating for my blog, it's the same concept for the colors. I try to, when you have meat, it's very bland looking, but you want to make sure that brown meat with a little bit of pink, that you're pairing it off with the vegetables, the colorful vegetables as well. And it's just, for me, again, it's colors and textures. When it comes to desserts, it's about edible flowers. So I try to find flowers that are edible, and a lot of flowers are. And that comes back to the Persian side of me, because we use rose water, rose petals, orange blossom water, things like that to fragrant and flavor our foods. But it really does add a lot of dimension to when you plate. Even at parties, I come out with flowers on my cake, or I cut the berries, or, if it's a chocolate cake, a little shake of powdered sugar for contrast. That's the other part of it, is the contrast. And I still do that even when I have family over and it's just a kid birthday party. And I feel like I still have to, my family and friends, they all come over. I think they expect it to be plated a certain way. So I go to to do that. And don't forget, also with the herbs, the blossoms are edible. So don't be afraid if you've got something featuring basil and you've got blossoms outside on your basil plant, they're beautiful purple flowers, sprinkle that on top. Yeah. Same thing, rosemary. They all have beautiful blooms, and you can infuse them for vinegar. I mean, there's just so many options that you can do.
I like that idea, infusing vinegar or infusing oil. And I know that you are a content expert about olive oils and maybe others too, but tell us about your book and some more information about cooking and using olive oil.
When I started that, actually I was helping my friend out, who is my co-author, Mary Plattis. She's Greek, I'm Persian, so olive oil is like, natural use for us. It was not even a question. We primarily use olive oil, but actually Mary is the one who taught me more in depth on the detail of it. She was trying to write a book, and I had all the photography and graphic design. We got together one time, and she lives here also in San Diego, and we kind of collaborated and said, hey, let's do this together. And that's how it started. And it started as an ebook at first, and we started getting calls from olive oil stores thinking it was a real book. And they said, when are you going to publish this as a real book? So we self-published our olive oil book as a hardback book. We sold primarily in olive oil stores and other gourmet food stores. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, I do. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So here it is.
Oh, it's so pretty.
Thank you. Yeah. And for us, we are both avid, Mary and I were both avid and very persnickety about our recipes and how we wanted it presented. And we were actually on the same page. Every recipe is going to get a photo. All the directions are going to be very clear. Nothing super complicated. And the thing with olive oil is there's so many misconceptions out there. And I'm not going to do this conspiracy theory stuff, but there is a lot of misinformation out there about it. You can cook with olive oil. You can roast with olive oil. You can bake with olive oil. You start with high quality oil. And I go through that all in the book. And Mary and I both went and got certified at UC Davis at an olive oil tasting class. It's like a 2-3 day event where you taste good olive oil and bad olive oil, and you learn all the tones and nuances about extra virgin olive oil. And today it's pretty much the only oil I use. I periodically use sometimes canola, not really. Grilling, I like avocado oil or grapeseed oil works really best, but olive oil is the extra virgin olive oil is the only oil that is exclusively retrieved from physical pressing of the olives. There is no chemicals to cut a seed like in coconuts and all the other seed oils. It is just pressing the olives, separating the water and the oil and the solids, and boom, there's your olive oil. And olive oil is the only one that is completely, it's like the juice of the fruit, basically.
Yeah. How interesting. Now, have you done like infusions? Have you done oil?
We have done infusions. You just have to be careful with how long they last. When you infuse at home, your herbs have to be really fresh and clean. If there was a bug in there, remember, it just takes away from how long that infused oil will last. I personally prefer purchasing the oil already infused, because what they do is they literally press everything together. So they take the blood orange, for example, blood orange olive oil. No, it's not red, but the essence of the orange is pressed with, the oranges themselves are pressed with the olives, and the essence comes with the oil. And I think it just has so much better flavor when you get it already store infused.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good to know. And when, I also want to kind of segue into your other cookbook, because besides needing to know more about oils, because actually I'm trying to transition, how I'm cooking to healthier. And I just learned about a lower smoking point when you use olive oil versus grapeseed oil. So that was informative. You have a camping cookbook. And
olive oil and camping, come on. What is
side, and quite honestly, that's what I've been doing, is learning how to grill properly. And one of the other interviews with Meathead Goldwyn was all about meat and grilling and vegetables. So I want to know how you do, your insight on the grilling out and cooking out.
Well, that started, you've told, I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and the boys were first, and we started with scouting, and my husband somehow ended up becoming cub master and leader of our group within a year. It's one of those things where everybody stepped back, and my husband was like, what, but he loved it and still is scoutmaster for the Boy Scout troop. And we've been camping. I mean, that's how the camping started. And at first we would go camping with the group. It wasn't very organized. People showed up at different times. They were cooking for themselves. And we were really brand new to all of this. And I was like, why aren't we doing stuff together? And so when my husband took it over, we kind of transformed it so that we would do one main dinner as a group. The kids were too young to help with the cooking, but the Boy Scouts, they do the cooking. But the Cub Scouts were too young, so the parents got involved. And next thing you know, we weren't doing hot dogs and burgers. We were doing Persian kebab and foil cooking and Dutch oven cooking. And by the time we left, the whole camp food had been elevated to a new level. Then when Boy Scouts came along, parents kind of step back a little and the boys take it over. So it was interesting to see how my boys especially, they when they weren't in charge of grubbing and the food, they were complaining about the quality of the camp food because they were used to my cooking. But all of that experience came with this book. And the Camp and Cabin cookbook was because of our love for cooking outdoors. And although it's technically not a camping book, you can take it camping, you can do it in your backyard, beach camping, beach cooking, whatever it is, whenever you're outside. And it could be as primitive as cooking in hot ash that's remaining in your campfire, to grilling, to Dutch oven cooking. I try to include as many techniques of cooking outside so that whether you have, if you have a camp stove, well, it's kind of like cooking on a stove at home. But when you don't have any of those things and you have a cast iron skillet and a campfire, what can I make? And I try to do that, include all those varieties. And again, in the book, I'm baking with olive oil. I'm using my herbs. I'm choosing my vibrant vegetables. And my whole philosophy of cooking is in both books. That's one thing that's consistent with my blog and my books, is that keeping it vibrant and fresh and flavorful and easy too. These aren't super complicated recipes at all.
Now, I heard you mention including the kiddos. And, that's kind of my philosophy is I'm raising children to be flexible, adaptable, independent thinkers, as they leave my house and go out in the world. It's not all about book learning. It's about thinking, thinking through things and responsibility. So I want to know, how are you including your family and teaching your kids? How have you included them in the kitchen safely, and get them, more information?
Well, the boys have always watched me cook and seen me cook. And when they started, and because of Boy Scouts, they did a lot of cooking through that. And when we camp on our own, they know, if I ask them to start the fire, they know what to do. So scouting really did help the boys. My daughter, we dabbled in Girl Scouts, but our troop wasn't very strong and didn't do that much. But my daughter learned a lot because she came along campouts with us and learned because of that too. She loves to bake. So I don't know if it's girls and baking, but they get together, they get super excited. And most kids I know love the idea of baking because they know what the end result is going to be. Yeah, exactly. Who says no to dessert? But I taught the Cub Scouts, these young boys, when we were doing Dutch oven cooking, we taught them how to make an upside down pineapple cake just using cake mix, store-bought cake mix. So you start with their age and their abilities, and it could just be, can you go get me little sticks and kindling? It starts with that, and little kids love finding sticks, and they find all that for you while you're doing some more dangerous work. But as they get older and their skill set gets more fine-tuned, you can really, that's parenting. You have to constantly change as they are changing with them. And what worked as a little baby obviously doesn't work with a toddler, doesn't work with a teenager. So my kids learned I was sick in bed one time and they wanted their chicken noodle soup, and they made it themselves. It wasn't quite the same, but they made it themselves. And because I have the recipe on the blog and they were following it, and maybe the vegetables were a little chunkier than they should have been, but they made it themselves and they were totally happy. And it's just one of those things that I think if they see you doing it, practice what you kind of preach a bit, and they're more willing to try it themselves.
So how do you make meals matter in your home, Laura? How do you do that?
We sit down together as a family most every night, especially before all the school activities take over, which happens when they get older. I noticed some of that was my husband especially, we noticed that was kind of crumbling a little bit with the high school age because, they were gone, some volleyball practice, whatever practice, so it's a little tougher as they get older because they're branching out. But, we eat most of our meals together. We talk during the meal, conversations. It's more than just what's on the plate and what's before you. I've already talked about the importance of the quality of what it is you're doing, but even if you're just there with your Costco pizza, it's that whole together time and quality time. And they look back, and I remember the conversations I had with my parents at dinner time, and sometimes it was just my parents talking to each other, and because they were talking about work, and my brother and I are just sitting there eating and listening. But you really I learned about what they were going through at work. I learned about what their jobs were, and it was boring, but I think now with screen time, I think the screens need to be not at the dinner table for sure. And the kids need to really learn something as simple as talking to another human being. It's so important. And that's really important at the table, whether it's breakfast. It doesn't matter what meal you're talking about either. You're talking about breakfast, lunch, dinner, even a snack together. We always make sure there's conversation, whether it's silly or serious. It doesn't matter as long as we're conversing together.
Right. Yeah. One of my sayings is put the phone down and pick your fork up.
That's right.
And let's eat, that's where, the magic really happens at the table, and the memories,
Yeah. I mean, I've been guilty. My husband too. We hear the phone ring, a text come in, and it's like, really, was it that important? We have to get up? No, we used to let the answering machine pick up. We used to walk to the phone. I mean, holy cow, we used to get up to go get the answer of the phone. That's a new concept.
Times have changed.
But, even my mom has, like, when she gets a text, she hears it ding, she's like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? I'm like, Mom, it's a text. That's the beauty. You can answer whenever. You don't have to answer right away. And I think we've really been programmed for that instant gratification, and we need to slow it down. That's why I like the camp book and the camping experience, is that you're forced to slow down. You're forced to deal with unexpected consequences. So if it gets cold, hot, rainy, windy, while you're, all those things, you have to adapt. And the kids have to learn how to do that. And I don't think they're really quite learning to quickly adapt to sudden changes and problem solving.
And yet identification of that right now is what you're saying, identifying that we do need to slow down and put our phones down and unlearn quickly responding to your phone ringing or text pinging or whatever else you have going on, to take the time to connect, be with other people, cook together, spend time together.
Yeah, my oldest is now 18 and he's going off to college in the fall. And that's that bittersweet moment. And we're like, what happens? As you see behind me, we still have his graduation garland up, and we have the standard pictures of him at every grade. And my husband's like, I remember that. We remember every moment. What happened? And that's the thing, is like, it happens fast, and you really need to slow it down and really savor the moments.
Well, and it sounds like you're making those things happen for sure. And
not every day, but yeah, I do my best.
Well, you give them roots, and then you give them wings.
Yep.
And you always welcome them back.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I keep thinking back to sharing meals, and sometimes it's hard to come up with meals to share with the family or friends. Like, you're going to have friends come over and it's a weeknight, what can you give us, maybe from your cookbooks if you wish, what are your go-to weekly meal ideas, and more, or how do you plan for your weekly meals, and then what are the ones like kind of your go-to, so people have some kind of frame of reference, or I knew our ideas, because I don't know how many cook you using Persian techniques, and like, which I know I don't, but I just was talking at lunch about it today. So share with us.
Well, two of my kids are avid soup eaters. They got that from my husband, and at a young age, my middle child, he fell in love with chicken noodle soup, and instead of taking sandwich to school, he had his little thermos, and it started with a little thermos, it got a little bigger, and now in high school, he's got a big old thermos. So, and his two favorite soups are in the camp and cabin cookbook. It's the chicken tortilla soup and chicken noodle soup. My daughter also loves chicken noodle soup. I make a pot of soup every week without fail, pretty much, because it could be 100 degrees outside and those two still want their soup, because that's how much they love it. So that's one of the I mean, I don't even look at the recipe anymore. I've made it so many times. But those two for sure are something that I constantly go to. And honestly, my family knows it so much too, because they know I always have soup in the house. So even when I have a family dinner and I make a pot of chicken noodle soup, I always have, whether it's the 4-year-old baby nephew or, my sister-in-law, they all want soup too. So it's funny. Soup is always a welcome addition, whether it's like a little side, small bowl, or a big meal. Another go-to meal we do a lot, of course, is doing like a baked pasta, one pan type, skillet type pasta. I do it at home. I do it in the Dutch oven. And it's just one of those things where you don't boil the noodles separately. You just add water to your sauce and let the noodles bake into it.
I've seen that. I've even come across a recipe for one, and I still am old school, boil the noodles. Definitely need to look at your book.
Yeah, what I have it started with a simple one that I have on my blog, and when I did it for the Dutch oven, I made that evolve even more, because I add kale and spinach to it. And that was one thing I learned once the kids got older, and a simple spaghetti dish is all they wanted. I started adding little bits of, I always had frozen spinach in the freezer. I just add a little bit of spinach so they see flecks of green and not freak out. And then eventually it was able to put even more in there. But it's always a go-to that's ready, available. And I change up the pasta all the time to make it a little different. Italian sausage, ground beef, turkey, that kind of thing. It just changes to whatever is in the refrigerator. And there's always a pasta dish that we like. And of course, Persian food is a little more, the stews are a little more labor intensive, but I make it tastes better the next day, and I make sure there's enough so that it lasts several days.
Well, that's good. So you might need a little more time, yet you can taste the difference the next day.
The next day. So if I have a party that it's mostly Persians, they want Persian food, I can make the stews ahead of time and just reheat it the day of. And it's actually preferred that way because it tastes so much better after it's been sitting for a day or two. So, and entertaining for me is just, I'm used to having family over. So for my son's graduation, we had about 25 people come up for dinner. And for me, that's small. I've done Christmas Eve dinner one time where everybody was in town, everybody said yes, and I was cooking for 70. And I have no idea how it snowballed. And my kids were young, and I still cooked everything from scratch. And that was crazy. So I've done a variety of, and then of course family of 5, and I never cook for just myself, but unless it's breakfast. But you modify. I try to come up with, when I'm planning for those dinner events, there's certain things you make in advance that will sit and do well. If I'm baking, which I usually am, there's certain things you can bake the day before and decorate if it's a cake or frosting or something the morning of. So there's certain things that I try to stagger so that I can make in advance for a party, and then all I have to do is maybe a couple appetizers, clean the house, and concentrate on the main course the day of. But we've done we've done kebabs for family, we've done steaks, we've done different degrees of complex recipes, and it just depends on what mood we're in. My husband will grill a brisket on the grill, and I only have to do the side dishes. So, then it changes everything of what we're going to do. But it just depends on, we'll ask the kids, what do you think we should make for Saturday? So we get the kids involved, and if they don't care, you just come up with something. I don't have a set formula on how I decide what we eat. It's
No,
a mood.
what I'm hearing you say though is you've actually taken the time to meal plan to know that
Yes.
you space it out for the week, so and make more than you need so that you can use it later on when the flavors are even better. I mean, they're really good when you make it, but then even better when you have it again later on in the week. And I think that that's something really important to remember is proper meal planning. With a little time later, even if it's the making process, it means you don't have to make a dish that next day.
That next day, exactly. And people are really flexible, and my family's, I've made new things that I've never tried before, and it flopped, and they're like, oh, it's okay, oh, it was overcooked, it was dry, I apologize. People don't care. It's just, honestly, it's about, they care, but they don't really care. It's about getting together and just having that time together.
Totally agree. Well, we've been talking about all these great tips and all these healthy eating, and I want to ask you, what's your guilty pleasure in food? What would you love to just have? And it's like, ooh, that's the thing.
Yeah, see, baked goods are really bad. I knew from the beginning when I began blogging that
good.
they're so good. Yeah, I love getting creative with baking, especially as I've been doing it for so long, and I like to try new varieties. And what would happen if you do this? It's a great experiment. But having it around is just horrible. So, and it's not just me. I feel guilty when my kids, mom made another cake, yay. Or here's some cookies, ooh, brownies, mom. So I try to avoid it. I try not to do it all the time. It seems in the summer it goes up a little bit more, and then it calms down again. But one of my guilty pleasure food-wise is I love pizza. And it could be gourmet pizza. It could be a simple pepperoni pizza. I just think it's just this magical combination.
Right.
And it's just so good. And like I said, it could just be a simple, tomatoes, basil, and, margarita, whatever. I just love pizza.
Well, there was an episode with David Chang who talks about pizzas, and even like the guilty pleasure of the chain one is that, as well as like the gourmet one. They went and had sushi on top in, Japan. He kind of went around to all these different cultural countries to see how they do pizza. It was fascinating, but I so appreciate the time I've got to spend with you today.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
But I know that you have something special for our audience today that maybe share now.
Yes, so I have a copy of my olive oil cookbook for whoever you're planning on making the winner. I don't know who.
Randomly selected winner.
Randomly selected. There you go. And this it's a smaller book, but we have all different ways of cooking with olive oil. We have poaching, grilling, marinating, baking. We break down. Mary and I are both very technique oriented. You learn the technique, how to do something, and then you cook without a recipe as well. So we found that people don't know what braising means, and so we really wanted to educate people that the different techniques. But I think it's been a fabulous book, and we have vegetables, meats, seafood, all kinds. We try to accommodate all the different eaters out there. But yeah, I have a copy of that for one lucky winner.
And so how can we keep in contact with you? I think you said you had a blog. We can connect.
I have my blog, familyspice.com, and on social media everywhere I'm at Family Spice.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me, Marilee Grossheim, and Laura Bashar on this episode of Making Meals Matter. And it's really just about having fun in the kitchen and ways to bring connection back to the table in our busy lives. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.